Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Who shows destination hurts as fast as means means X. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And let's go back to Yemen. In most of the videos I've talked about Yemen, I've been one of those who are skeptical that there's really any kind of a proxy war going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And this is how the mainstream media wants to characterize it. This is how the United States wants to characterize it. And this is how Saudi Arabia especially wants to characterize it. But everything I saw pointed to the fact that there really isn't much connection between Iran and the Houthis or anything going on in Yemen. Particularly because if you look a little closer, you find out that the Zadiyah is a form of Islam followed by these Yemeni tribesmen, is a legacy religion, is the oldest and most traditional of Shia sects, and apparently has no connection whatsoever, really, between their brand of Shia Islam and what is practiced in Iran and Iraq. And so there's really no affinity. And there also is no allegiance of these Zaydis, scholars and imams, to anyone in Iran. The connection has been made previously because certain members of the Yemeni government, including the previous president, Saleh, or actually now the previous president to the previous president of Yemen, Saleh, had visited Iran. It's not uncommon for these global leaders to mingle amongst themselves, and certainly not out of character at all for somebody from Yemen to be visiting somebody in Iran. But and the religion apparently is stronger among the priests and scholars than amongst the tribesmen who are doing the bulk of the fighting. It's more part of their identity than anything else, and they're from the mountains of North Yemen. So to get back to the original idea, there's been certain arms that have made their way to Yemen, but of course with the flood of arms around that region, everything coming out of Libya, everything filtering through because of the Syrian war and everything else, it's pretty much hard to say where a lot of weapons are coming and going to. But we have the situation in Yemen that's now being used once again as a battleground for Saudi Arabia's goals, and it doesn't really have as much to do with this much touted Sunni Shia divide and this proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. There just is no proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran there. Although, interestingly enough, Joost Hilterman of the International Crisis Group put it this way. He said that, quote, "The Iranians are just brilliant. They play no role whatsoever in Yemen, but they get all the credit," unquote. And we also have quotes from Alain Chouet, who is a senior French intelligence analyst, and he said, quote, "You've never seen in the past any evidence of Iranian support to the Yemeni Shias because there was none," unquote. He said the Zaydis are very different and far from Iranian mullahs' orthodoxy in their beliefs. And he goes on to say, too, that the Iranians preferred President Saleh, who had ruled for 30 years and had an uneasy relationship with Saudi Arabia, unquote. So we have a number of key figures who support the idea that there really is no connection really between Iran and Yemen. And there's even ridiculous stories coming out right now. Supposedly a congressional committee member claimed that there was Iranians who were leading attacks by the Houthis. And so we're seeing this propaganda war get ramped up by the United States and Saudi Arabia to try and paint it as more evidence. So pretty soon we're going to have Lindsey Graham's and the like adding the capital of Yemen to the list of Iranian conquered territories in the region. And in fact, our old buddy Netanyahu has come out of the dark corners and said that Quote, after the Beirut-Damascus-Baghdad axis, Iran is conducting a pincher movement to the south to conquer the entire Middle East. That's quite a claim. So he's saying that they've already conquered Beirut, Damascus, and Baghdad, and that's pretty interesting that he would say that Iran has conquered Damascus when we have ISIS and Al-Qaeda overrunning the country, and we also have the United States bombing them to keep that government in power in Damascus, the Assad government. And of course Baghdad, Iran is involved there and is actually helping the United States theoretically salvage that situation there. So, and the idea that somehow Iran controls Lebanon because of the Hezbollah presence. These are all interesting claims, but all at least somewhat debatable. But to say that Iran has shown that they're going to conquer the entire Middle East is pretty laughable. And then he goes on to say that the Iran, Lausanne, Yemen axis is very dangerous to humanity. It must be stopped. So here we get another warning from Netanyahu about the dangers to all humanity when it's barely even a security risk for Israel, but somehow any implied threat, any imagined threat are all dangerous to humanity. But interesting that he would include Iran, Yemen, and Lausanne in that because the Lausanne is the P5+1, the United States, UK, France, Russia, China, and Germany, all who are negotiating this Iran deal. So now basically anybody who is against Netanyahu, anybody that's against the Iran, who is against bombing Iran, is now against Israel and is part of this terrorist axis of Iran, Yemen, and now the U.S., UK, France, Russia, China, and Germany. But you were used to this kind of hyperbole from Netanyahu. But once again, it shows that all the political opportunists are lining up, including Netanyahu, to take advantage of this situation in Yemen and paint it as a proxy war that is not. So clearly, we call bullshit on that. And then when you get into some of the other aspects, I've talked a lot about some of the background material and peripherals in my last couple of videos about what's happening in Yemen. But now we have once again more details about not only do we have the Saudi intervention overtly now with these airstrikes, but also more insidious over the years, influencing events in Yemen. We also have a familiar U.S. pattern also of destabilizing. So what we have is something that's actually akin to things that we've seen over and over again, the same blueprint of destabilization, even that we see in the Ukraine. We have all these U.S. NGOs in there fomenting, and Saudi Arabia even backing the so-called Arab Spring that happened there and toppled Saleh. And then we have the U.S. Also in there supporting these southern separatists. And now we find the Houthis moving south to fight them as well as Al-Qaeda. And but part of this could end up being Yemen once again being repartitioned into 2 or 3 different countries. So we're going to see this balkanization that we see all over that region and all over in U.S. Global plans for destabilization of all these different countries and regions. And so we could see the country broken up and creating a more advantageous strategic position for both Saudi Arabia and the United States. And I also want to mention that, last but not least, a couple other interesting factoids that came out about Yemen. Apparently, the Yemenese government had 130 fighters. So we have 130 fighters that are up for grabs, I would imagine, between different groups in Yemen. And we also have 600 surface-to-air missiles that are now loose. So we could see some pretty dramatic warfare in whatever unfolds here in Yemen. We're also finding out, of course, that for the time being, at least, there's no plan for a ground invasion of Yemen, which is surprising. There was quite a lot of specific details that were floating around about Egyptian troops already offshore, etc., and troops anywhere ranging from 40,000 to 150,000. All the dust is settled, and we're seeing the truth of the matter that Saudi Arabia is going to unusually, apparently, going to use the U.S. Model and try and win this war, basically using airstrikes. But we also found out that they're planning on doing airstrikes there for anywhere from 1 to 6 months. So once again, we have a long-term conflict, and we'll have to see what kind of goals can be reached with strictly airstrikes. And then we also have a claim of Israeli fighters in Yemen, but the source, all the sources seem to reference back to one article that was posted by an Iranian source, and therefore, for better or worse, is not necessarily reputable. So I'm not going to do any story on Israeli fighters as of yet. It would be a very, very dramatic step in this war if that were true, but I just don't think it is. So anyway, there we have it. Upgrade on some of my other Yemeni videos discussing the fact that there really is no proxy war. This is all another propaganda war. It's another blueprint that we've seen before that's been used by Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and different countries through that region and all over the globe. And we're going to see another relatively low-level conflict simmering there, but at least for the time being, Iran has nothing to do with it. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.